So for Piaget, there were four distinct stages. The first is a sensory motor stage. This is the initial stage and runs for about the first 2 years of life. At this stage, the baby is a purely sensory creature. Information is gained through the senses and through the child's motoric activities, but the child perceives and manipulates, but doesn't have any reasoning. There's no sense of time, no sense of stability, not even a differentiation early on between the child and other people. It's at this stage, over a lengthy and interesting process, that object permanence is attained. And what object permanence is the understanding that objects exist independently of one's actions or perceptions of them. So if I have a ball and I put it behind a screen, you know, even though the ball is out of sight, that it will continue to exist. This might seem so obvious, it's barely worth saying. But Piaget's claim was that before about 6 months of age, babies act as though objects removed from sight are gone. They're so caught up in the sensation, in the here and now, that they lack the ability to appreciate object permanence. And for instance, this is why, according to Piaget, babies are so amused by peekaboo. You cover up your face and then reveal it, and then babies crack up or gasp in surprise or whatever. And it's because when you covered up your face, they think you're gone. And then when you open it up, you reappear, which is amazing. So that's the first stage. The second stage, which has been the subject of most psychological developmental research, is aged from 2 to 7. The baby is now a child and starting to reason. They have object permanence. They have other capacities. They could think, they could differentiate themselves and others. They have a rudimentary understanding of time. But they have certain very interesting limitations. They can reason, but they can't reason in a higher order way that you and I can. And one illustration of this is what Piaget called egocentrism. So children are egocentric. And he didn't mean this in a way that when I say, my best friend is egocentric, meaning he cares only for himself, doesn't care about other people. What Piaget meant was children literally can't see the world through another's eyes. They literally can't understand that other people have different perspectives than they have. So one classic illustration of this is the 3 mountains task. In the 3 mountains task, the child is put in a position where he looks at 3 mountains of different heights in different orientations, and he's asked to draw it. For instance, he could draw it pretty well. It's a kid, a 4 or 5-year-old. But now he's asked, how would somebody who's on the opposite side of the stage draw it, who sees it from a different angle? And at this point in development, children, according to Piaget, are just incapable of understanding other people will have different perspectives and draw the mountains in different ways. They believe other people draw the mountains as they do. And in general, Piaget believed that for children, they didn't quite get the idea that they could know something and another person couldn't know it, or that other people could know things that they don't. They're egocentric in that they think the world as they see it is pretty much the world as everybody else sees it. And that's their first main limitation. Their second main limitation is, according to Piaget, they lacked the concept of conservation. And what conservation is the idea that certain operations on the world will change some properties, but not others. An adult appreciates that the number of things will remain constant even if you move them around. If I have a bunch of checkers and I slide some of them to make them take up more space and they say, are there more checkers here? You'd laugh and say, of course not. They're just spread out. But kids can't conserve a number through a transformation. And so they think that there are now more. Similarly, if you pour water into a container that's of a different shape, so that the water that becomes higher or takes up more space lengthwise or something, for an adult, the same amount of water, volume of water is conserved across the transformation. But for kids, you put water into a tall glass, and then say, is there more now? And they'll say yes. And, there's a lot of findings of Piaget that you could really question, and they're very critical of, and we'll get to some of that. But I'll tell you, this is really cool. You could really do this if you have a kid. So, for instance, you could make the stakes count. You have some M&Ms, and you have some M&Ms, and the kid has some M&Ms, and you say, who has more, and which ones do you want? And the kids might count and say, oh, they're about the same. And then you take one pile of M&Ms, and you spread them out. And now you say, who has more? And the kids say, oh, I want the ones that are spread out because now there's more, which is kind of nuts. The next stage, around age 7, is the concrete operation stage. At this point, the kid is pretty sophisticated. You have less egocentricity, more logical thought. You don't have problems with conservation. But still, even at this point, there's an inability to reason fully abstractly or fully hypothetically. One way to put it is, the child isn't quite capable of scientific reasoning at this point. Like, here's an example. Suppose all of a sudden I have back pain, and I'm trying to figure out, why do I have back pain? And so I might do experiments. I might say, well, geez, maybe I should flip my mattress, see how that makes me feel. Or, I'll change my shoes. Or maybe I'm, lifting firewood too much. Do experiments. And we do this all the time. When we think about experiments, we think, gee, that's something which scientists do in laboratories. But in real life, we often do experiments. We have to figure out, why is our car making this noise? Maybe I better change the type of gas you put into it. Or maybe I'm riding the brake too heavy. You try out different things, and you make generalizations and so on. And this sort of reasoning might come naturally for a sophisticated adult, but is not present at this early stage. And so children struggle with it. And finally, you become an adult. You enter what's called a formal operation stage, where you're a full-fledged adult. Unlike Freud, Piaget didn't believe that there were further traumas or troubles or developments or transformations as an adult. He believed everybody went through these stages. He was rather mellow about them. Often he would give lectures in the United States, and he described the American question as, how do you speed up these stages? I want my kid to hit formal operations at age 10. But overall, Piaget said these are just a natural stage that the mind goes through, developing over time through experience and through cognitive restructuring, to bring it from a baby who has an extraordinarily limited understanding of the world to us, who are pretty darn smart.